Borsey. I am from the Lummi Nation.
And so, we're talking about the Salmon People project. How do you, what do you do in this,
I am a production assistant. I also am in operations, handling like the logistics.
You mentioned meeting a lot of cool people. Like, who are some of the people you've been talking to?
I think one of the coolest people is Robert Olafson from the Elwha tribe. He's an older man, and he was actually the second Native American to graduate in the United States with a physics degree.
Oh, wow.
And he graduated with a degree in physics and chemistry. And he, is kind of the reason that the Natural Resources Department even exists in Elwha in the first place, who was, leading in terms of dam removal and river restoration. And he was great. He had a lot of stories to tell, even pre-contact stories about the wars that the Elwha used to have with other tribes and villages around the area.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
How does he speak about it? Is it more like in like an oral history fashion, or is it more like a story, like a children's story?
No, like a real, the story that he told us was actually documented and it was proven to be true. He said the last war that they had, or the last battle that they had with the Lummi Nation, which is a tribe on the west coast, kind of where Twilight was,
Oh, sure.
So Lummi, the wolves, right?
Yeah, great. I love that movie.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that. I'm just playing. But Elwha and Lummi were in a battle, and right when the battle started, an 8.0 earthquake hit and slid the side of the mountain, killing everybody except one warrior. And that's kind of they took it as a message, like, we're not going to battle, anymore. On both sides, they were just like, all of our whole band was killed pretty much. So, and it's actually documented, he said. I was like, wow.
That's insane. So you could probably identify the mudslide even.
Yeah.
That's, wow. You obviously didn't start off in this work. How did you get into it? What drove you into it?
I've always kind of been in touch with work like this. Starting in middle school, I started going on canoe journey. I left war canoe, racing canoe, for journey canoe, which is traveling, around our traditional highways, the waterways, to different nations, and just practicing our culture and living, how our ancestors did. And in the contemporary, of course, with modern tents and modern foods and stuff, but and with that, I was able to be a part of protests in Seattle. The protests here at Cherry Point against the coal terminal, that would have been the second biggest coal terminal in North America, had Lummi not put a stop to it.
And where was this about?
This was right on our backyard. It's called Cherry Point.
Okay, so wow, that's how far away would you say?
From Lummi?
From right here.
Probably 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes from here, but it's 10 minutes from Lummi. We used to paddle there all the time for practice on our war canoes, or on our journey canoes, just kind of practicing that distance.
Oh wow!
So it's it holds a lot of value to me.
Is the coal
personally.
deposit here on the shoreline for
No, so the coal would actually be brought from Crow Agency territory, over to here by railway, and the coal dust would have been wreaked havoc on habitats all across that railway. And then the shipping containers, so when shipping containers go out to Asia and they unload everything, they have to have weight bringing them down, so they fill themselves up with water. They come here and they release that water, and with that water comes invasive species that would have just messed our environment up, like the grass, all of that would have just been not, it would not have been great. So,
well, we have lampreys in the Great Lakes now because of I forget what they call it, Asian cod or something like that.
Yeah, I've read about those.
Tell him in detail how the Lummi stopped this. This was a big deal, and it really was stopped because of the Lummis.
It was huge. So there was a guy who actually, I forgot where he worked, but he came to our school and kind of talked to us about it. And he said at the beginning there was no hope. I mean, this is like a billion-dollar company that they're competing against. And they had sent Lummi a check, a giant check with, the number on it. It wasn't even a number. It was question mark, question mark, question mark with the money symbol, basically saying how much money will it take to buy you guys off. And we sent them pictures of us burning the check, our council members and some of our elders burning the check. It was pretty cool.
That is awesome. I like that.
I mean, just from there, it was legal proceeding after legal proceeding. They even started doing, I'm pretty sure they even started doing some of the work and just paying off the fines because they were so wealthy. They thought they had so much confidence that they were going to win that they even started, developing out in Cherry Point and just paying the fines that they were given, just literal, like, we don't care.
And has anybody looked into the final numbers
for
the
fines?
How much did they pay?
I have no idea, but
well, tell them why it was so important to the Lummi tribe to save this land.
That
at Cherry Point.
From what I've heard, and I don't know if this is 100% accurate because it's been years since I've even talked about Cherry Point into depth, but I'm pretty sure it was a sacred burial ground. I mean, my uncle, when we used to walk out there when I was a kid, he would tell me not to walk in these certain areas because that's where our ancestors were buried. And I mean, it's an important reef netting site for our ancestors. They used to go out and reef net in those areas. And I mean, now you can stand on Cherry Point and look in both directions, and there's refineries in both directions. Unfortunately, we didn't have the power to stop those refineries from being built. But
what kind of refineries are they?
An aluminum one and an oil one.
Oh, of course, it's oil. Oh, it's oil.
And yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that we stopped the coal terminal because I think that would, these are smaller refineries. This one would have just been super sized.
And has there been a directly observable change in the environment from the two smaller ones from when they're built?
I'm sure there has. I haven't even looked.
You're just too young to know.
Yeah, I'm sure there has. I mean, you can't fish out there. That's for sure anymore.
It's poisonous fish at this point?
There's no fish.
Oh, they're just not there.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, we've fished out there, and you can fish way out and crab way out from the refineries, but we've tried reef netting out there today, and we just could see little smelt, and that's about it.
Growing up for you, fishing and stuff, were you always in a boat or?
Yeah, so I mean, I love to pull fish as well, so I'd pull fish off the shores with my uncle and up in the streams up over here. But if we're commercially fishing, we would fish off of mostly a 17-foot skiff.
And I've noticed a huge drop in the size of fish from when I used to fish as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same out here? Have the fish been progressively getting smaller within your lifetime?
In my lifetime, I can't say it's been noticeable. I mean, people used to come, even when I was a kid, I remember people coming in with boatloads of fish. Now you might get lucky to catch, 15 fish on a good day. So it's definitely the amount that you catch. And one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life was an elder brought in a 68-pound king salmon.
Ooh.
And it was what? I didn't even know. It was taller than me at the time. I was like, what the heck is that? And then my uncle had told me that fish used to commonly be that size returning home from the ocean, and they used to live long enough and not have to deal with toxins and pollutants and barriers, just to survive. So he said, he's seen many fish like that, and it's crazy that I've never seen any fish like that since, that one.
Growing up Lummi, what was that like for you?
It's definitely something to be proud of, hearing all of the stories and growing up and, being engaged in my culture, culturally active, being able to dance, sing Lummi songs, make regalia, and just having like the knowledge that the Lummi elders had passed down to me, my elders, that the knowledge that they have passed down to me, it's just something to be proud of. And that's not even like getting into how beautiful it is out here. Like I've been all over the world, and have seen many different places, and I still haven't found a place that's as beautiful as this place.
For you, like, when was the first time you remember experiencing racism?
I mean, I think racism, can come in a lot of forms, and when you're young and you're not, as exposed to the world, you might hear racist remarks that might not sound racist to other people. Definitely, I think when I was 7, we had gone from a lake into a gas station, and man was just kind of hovering behind us, calling us like a bunch of snarky, like the N-word and like a bunch of just like crazy stuff. And finally my uncle turned around and like yelled at him because he just was like harassing us. But like, not much you can do when your kids are, right there. As a man, you don't want to, get into conflict. And I mean, people do carry guns around here, and, so you just never know, what kind of person you're going to run into, especially somebody who's, that ignorant and arrogant. So
is racial violence a common occurrence here?
In Bellingham, I wouldn't say so much, but you start getting into the county areas, yeah, definitely more so. I mean, we've had Lummi's had its fair share of fights and court battles with like farmers out in Nooksack, out in Linden, and I mean Ferndale, is known to have been like super racist towards Lummi people in particular. Yeah, I mean, since my uncle had gone to school there, he had told me a story one time about him. He had made starting shortstop as a freshman for Ferndale High School, which was like never, that never happened, especially being Native American. And somebody from the Ferndale fan group threw a big battery out at him, and it hit him and split his forehead open. He had to play the game bloody because, that had happened. And, I mean, still today, like kids, being racist to, our tribal members out there. And I mean, there was actually a thing, and I don't know if this ties into being racist, but CSSP had done a land acknowledgement out in Ferndale, and then Ferndale had emailed CSSP back saying that they can't show the video anymore until Lummi proves that they were actually, on Ferndale land and territory, when Ferndale borders our reservation, which is a colonial construct. The reservation, like our lands, all these islands that you see out here are traditional territory. So why would we not be literally right on the border? Like, and especially if we had trades and relationships with the Nooksack tribe, which you have to pass through Ferndale territory to get to. So it just really made no sense. But it was pushed by this lady who just absolutely fights Lummi on everything and anything. And she just was basically, she put it in their ear that, we had no proof that we were there prior to colonialism. It's like when you're an oral language or an oral culture, you don't, nothing really goes past word, mouth to ear, because we didn't have written text, prior to colonization. And don't get me started on that.
Why do you think, there's like this huge belief in like a white replacement theory almost?
I think when people hear land back, they think that we literally want our land back, though that would be nice. It's not feasible or doable, unless we are buying it back acre by acre. And I think a lot of people are threatened by that, but they don't. A lot of people choose to be ignorant rather than take the time to research and study, what land back means to us. And, even if you ask an educated Native person, what that means, I mean, for me at least, it means respect the land like my ancestors respected the land. You know, that's what land back for me is. It's you know, treat the land like we once did so that we can have an earth, or, you know, so we can have a home, you know, in 500 years. And, you know, we're not even estimated to have that much time given the track that we're on. If I was going to answer that question with one sentence, it's that we stepped away from our indigenous ways of thinking as a unit, you know, as Europeans, indigenous Europeans, indigenous Asians, indigenous Africans, like everywhere in the world, we all stepped away from our indigenous ways of thinking.
So how do you like for like anybody who's white that wants to help, like, you know, how is it that you can properly engage with an indigenous way of thinking without it becoming a sort of exercise in colonialism where you're just stealing more culture?
Right. I don't want to say that it's just white people, because you look at all people in America that aren't indigenous to America, like, I think it's more than just white people that are disconnected from their ancient indigenous cultures. I think it's, you know, anybody who's not indigenous to America and not connected to their indigenous cultures, you know, like, that's, and I don't mean to, like, you know, this is like really controversial, but
oh yeah I'm aware.
It's really, you know, like, it's the truth, you know, like, Black people or African Americans don't traditionally come here, and yes, they were brought here against their will. Same with Asian Americans, like a lot of their ancestors were brought here against their will, and to build, like, you know, like railways and things like that. And they, you know, are their ancestors are refugees, right? And I mean, it would be hard to do it, but if people who are not indigenous or who are indigenous to America, if we could reconnect back to our cultures, our homelands in some sort of way, I'm sure we would find ways to solve these issues. And I mean, this isn't just in America, this is like all around the world, you know, like Asia, you know, like if people connected back to the indigenous side, I'm sure there would be more empathy for our planet and more will and drive to make change. It's like, I mean, it isn't white people are always blaming, you know, white people, saying white people are the problem. It's like, well, I mean, maybe they kicked it off, but this has been, you know, this has been a journey, and I mean, it's been hundreds of years, and every race has had a hand in the pot, you know, destroying our climate. And unfortunately, more, you know, recently, Native Americans have also, you know, had their hand in the pot of destroying our climate. I mean, I'm wearing Crocs right now, made in China. I mean,
you got Vans on.
Even though it's a, you know, like, I have to live in a culture that, you know, is a capitalistic culture and that doesn't, you know, really care for our climate, doesn't care for our environment. It's still not an excuse.
You know, one of the big things is like that indigenous people aren't just, you know, here in America. Indigenous people are all across the world, Japan and stuff, and they're often, you know, ignored. How does the Salmon people try to reach out to, you know, groups outside of like America?
I think the Salmon, and this is something that I proposed actually a couple months ago, because the Salmon, you know, don't just, you know, come back here, and, you know, they're not just here. They go up north through Alaska, through Russia, down through Japan, and the you know, the Pacific Islands around, like, they follow up the South America, Mexico, North America, like the entire span that salmon, you know, go is, I mean, they touch so many different continents, and so many different people need them, but we just don't have the capacity to you know, connect our series, you know, on that level. And maybe someday, you know, we will be able to travel and go to China and Russia and Japan, talk about what salmon mean to them and what fishing means to them. And but right now we are just focusing on like more tribes here that are, and a big theme for our Salmon People project is dam removal. So we're focusing on tribes, who are on rivers where dams are located in. That's why the Elwaz, that's why we were over in Elwaz, because they had actually successfully removed a dam and are in the midst of successfully restoring their river, and they're seeing increase in salmon, returning to their rivers. And it's an inspirational story, and I think that story needs to be heard, and I think that more tribes need to be inspired to make that kind of change, especially on the Snake River and places where salmon just it's pretty much like a lifeline for salmon.
And why do you think like earlier struggles like Frank's Landing and the fish-ins at Fort Lawton and stuff didn't, pander out into something greater?
I think that things in today's system and in today's world move slow, and people are scared of change. And if it's not necessary, people don't like to change. I mean, that's why it was such a struggle for Native Americans to even get those rights in the first place, even though it was something that was promised to us. Billy Frank Jr. was arrested over 100 times for this.
For fishing?
Yeah, and he's not the only one. You go talk to elders all over Washington State, from East Coast to West Coast. From East Side to the West Coast. All of our elders were getting arrested. I mean, my uncle used to tell me about when he would be followed around by a helicopter, or they'd be just out there searching for fishermen. He'd have to kill his motor so they couldn't see his way, and they'd paddle, and then when the helicopter would fly far enough away, they'd zip on out.
Oh, wow, okay.
Robert Olafson talked about him sneaking into areas with his buddies and poaching fish when he was younger. Things like that. So, those stories are all around the state, and it took years and years for them to even implement change on that regard. So when you're talking about, dam removal and all of that, and you don't have many options, in terms of fighting, such powerhouse corporations, you're not going to see change, for 50, 60 years, because, you're going to lose these battles again and again, so I think the best thing is making noise. And, I heard you say earlier, a trend now is kind of restoring, our Mother Earth, restoring the ecosystems that we were destroying all this time. I think now is a great time for people to take action and make moves on, these corporations, and, kind of force people to be more accountable for their destruction.
So, in what ways would you think we should hold, the greater corporations that are obviously polluting more than us? How should we hold those people accountable?
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough because when you start getting into economics and stuff like that, if you're a country that's going to hold a corporation accountable for their destruction, you risk losing that corporation, and that hurts your economy. And so that's a huge conversation, and they just leave to a country that's not going to hold them accountable, and that's a quick fix, easy fix, and it's a lose battle for all around. So I don't know. That's a good question. I have no idea how you would implement that.
And so, I guess wrapping up, where would you like to see the movement go? Obviously, besides fixing more of the problems,
talking on macro level.
Yeah, more on a macro level.
I think everything's sustainable. You know, it's the way to go. I mean, and there's so many issues in America that need to be fixed, and around the world that need to be fixed. Sustainable electricity, sustainable power. You know, huge cut and limit on food waste. An answer to starvation around the world, because that is a thing. Cut back on pharmaceuticals and go back to your traditional medicines and traditional herbs, because that's also polluting our waters. A step away from fossil fuels, find a more sustainable way to throw our trash out. There's just so many things that need answers, and not many people are trying to come up with those answers.